Hi, y'all. Well, we're back with part 2 of how to survive emergencies. As I explained at the beginning of my last video, I worked with a couple of other YouTube channels during the Hurricane Helene aftermath. And being right on the edge, living right on the edge of where the devastation happened here in East Tennessee, I had firsthand experience with people and their needs and the devastation that happened. And so I'm going to continue today with giving you all some categories of things that will help you not just to survive in a scenario like that, but also to help you to thrive in a scenario like that. And so the next area that I'm going to talk about is first aid. When you're secluded and the roads are either blocked or completely gone, if you've got someone that gets sick or injured or whatever, then it's going to be up to you to take care of those medical needs. And so, first of all, you need to think about anyone in your family who has medical situations where they have ongoing medicines that they take, blood pressure medicine, diabetes medicine, whatever. And consider everything associated with that. And also medical equipment, over-the-counter medicines you're going to need. Having some Tylenol or ibuprofen or, something like that can be, could be detrimental in a situation like this. Another thing that we came across that people needed, and I came across this very often, and that was insect repellent. And not just the insect repellent, but also the cortisone creams and antibiotic ointments for the people that had already had the insect bites and those kinds of things. So those are some things that you would probably need. A very good first aid kit. And I'm not talking about something that's just full of Band-Aids and gauze bandages and stuff. There's a lot more to a first aid kit than that. Another thing that you should think about is some kind of blood clotting agent. I was listening to another YouTube channel. I can't think of the name of the channel, but this guy is a former doctor, former military, and he said that if you've got a situation where there's a lot of blood to take unscented Kleenexes or toilet paper and just start ripping it up and putting it onto the place that's bleeding, and then put pressure on it, and that would act as a clotting agent. Never had the experience to do that, but that's something that you would need to think about. And then also, you can get online or at Walmart, different places like that, you can get dental repair kits where, you would need some kind of medication to help with pain, stuff to replace a crown, lots of things like that. Vitamins. If you take vitamins, or even if you don't take vitamins, normally in a situation where food was scarce, vitamins could be extremely beneficial. So, anything that is over-the-counter medications, poison ivy medications, because in a bad situation like what we had, and people are out having to cut up downed trees and, things like that, no doubt There's going to be poison ivy around. So that's one of the things that you should consider putting in your first aid supplies. Now, the next category that I'm going to talk about is power source. And I mentioned in the area of first aid supplies about consideration for family members. During Helene, as I was working with Pinball, we got information. I actually got this information from a woman that I knew in a county near here, that a woman had a little boy that was, I think he was 9 years old at the time. He was on life support at home, and they did not have power backup. And so I talked with her on the phone, and I questioned, how did you deal with that during the loss of power? And she said she prayed a lot. So when Pinball contacted me and told me that he was going to have solar generators with solar panels available, we got one really large generator that would power multiple things. And we actually took it to this home. And I had the opportunity to go in and deliver it and video there. And when I walked into that little boy's bedroom, I think there was like 8 or 9 or 10 different pieces of equipment. I can't remember exactly. I'm going to link the video. It'll be a video from Pinball Preparedness, but I'm going to link that video to this so that y'all can watch and see what could have happened. That little boy had little small refrigerator in his room where he had medication that had to be refrigerated, and then suction equipment because they had to use that with him being on life support. And there was just all kinds. It was like a little hospital room. And so be sure and go and watch that video. And then, but as far as power sources, solar generators, you can use them inside the house. And, depending on what your need is, to run a refrigerator, to run a freezer, to keep lights on. And then if you get a larger generator, then you could use it to run a stove, a dryer, a pump. You just have to, check and see how many watts it takes for each thing, and then look and see how many watts that the generator will accommodate. And the other thing, as far as generators are concerned, you might want to consider a dual fuel generator. Of course, that kind of generator has to be used on the outside, and they're very noisy. But there could be a need for that, depending on the situation. If you need something that's going to be quiet, without smell, without sound, or if it's like it was up in North Carolina, those folks were thrilled to death to get a gas generator. So anyway, if you've got a wood stove or have a place to put a wood stove, make sure you've got, a cord of wood stacked up or 2 cords of wood stacked up. Duraflame logs. And this one was one I had never thought about until I saw someone, excuse me, someone in North Carolina had pulled the dryer lint out of their dryer because outside everything was wet. There was nothing to use for kindling. And so they used their dryer lint to get their fire started. And then, of course, make sure you've got plenty of matches, and make sure that you've got matches that are going to strike even in damp weather. And heavy-duty drop cords. If you're going to use generators, you're going to need heavy-duty drop cords. And, drop cords that are good for indoors and outdoors. And make sure that you've got, gas cans that are full of gas. And another good thing is solar lights. You know, you can put them outside whenever the sun's shining, and then you could use them inside at night. And a way to cook. You know, there's lots of ways, lots of things that you could use besides your stove. You know, it's just a small hot plate, if you've got one of these generators, would work fine. And so a grill, a propane burner, a Coleman stove. There are just lots and lots of different things as far as power. Candles, not so much, maybe solar candles. I keep tea light candles because I've got a large cast iron trivet that has a place underneath it to put tea candles that could be used to warm up a can of soup. And so I do keep some tea candles for that purpose. But, you know, make sure that you think about what you use on a daily basis, and then get things that will accommodate what you need. And my next category is clothing. Now, when the hurricane hit last year, it was still pretty warm. It was, what was it, early September? But the power was off in a lot of those areas for, a month or two, some of them longer than that. And so it turned cold. And so we were scrambling to get Little Betty heaters, and Patara with Appalachia's Homestead was able to get in touch with the Little Betty company, and they delivered, I think, 400 Little Betty heaters. And from the warehouse where we were working, those Little Betty heaters went out fast. And they distributed them to the churches in the county, and they had people that were driving them into the mountains for people to use in tents and campers and storage buildings and all kinds of stuff, because it was frigid cold. It turned cold real fast at night. So, but as far as clothing's concerned, make sure you've got warm coats and wool socks. You know, this rayon, polyester, that kind of stuff, it does not wick away moisture. And you will end up with wet feet and cold feet, and then you'll end up sick. And that's not going to be good at all. Wool socks and wool blankets, you can't beat it. Or cotton quilts, 100% cotton quilts. And so the other thing is to make sure you've got some good, sturdy shoes and boots. And of course, you know, it's going to depend on the time of the year that you go through some sort of emergency. But gloves, hats, boots, those kinds of things, and then clothing that's made so that you can layer it if it's summertime. And if it happens in the wintertime, but if it happens in the summertime, having a good 100% cotton long sleeve shirt and a straw hat or some kind of a hat with a large brim on it to shade your face and neck from the sun could keep you from having a heat stroke. So, you know, make sure that you've got the right clothes to accommodate you, whether it's hot or cold temperatures. And so I'm going to leave off right there for today. That makes 6 categories that we've covered so far, and I've got 17 categories here. And some of them whenever I first started doing this, I'd never thought about some of this stuff. And so make sure you watch every single one of them, get you a pencil and write things down. And let me tell you something, you're not going to be able to get this stuff all at one time. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, and there's still things that I need to get. So make you a list and then prioritize what's on the list. And these categories that I'm doing I'm sort of trying to do them in a logical order that would, in an important order. But depending on where you live and what's close to you and that kind of stuff, some of these categories might not even be in the right order. So you need to look at the list and then prioritize a list for yourself so that you can get the more important things done first. So anyways, I will not be doing a video tomorrow. I might get a chance to do another one later today, and if I do, I'll probably upload it tomorrow. But if I don't, I'll see you back here on Monday. But anyway, until the next time, God bless you.